calling the meeting to order at 6:30, with the exception of our favorite Ian Keel. There's no public. I'm going to waive the reading or the discussion of rules of procedure and ask if there are additions to the,
I have none.
whatever, the agenda.
No,
Okay.
I have none.
And are there, does anybody else? So you may count a lot, but maybe not entirely.
No.
Not entirely.
Okay, and are there changes to the order of the agenda?
No.
So I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 22nd,
So moved.
2018. Richard moved, Miranda seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, okay. Let me find my pen.
So I will note that Dan Zambreski is away for a couple weeks. So of course, Saturday night, approximately 4 hours after he left town, a big tree fell across Melody Hill Road. And Troy had to call me and say, can't get down the road. And then my brother called me and said, can't get up the road. And
Where's your chainsaw?
Alan Belleville was there in like 15 minutes with somebody else, and then they came up with the backhoe and they got this big tree off. So that was awesome. That's my update. Do we have other updates for the highway?
I spoke with Dan on Thursday, and they have been actively doing their typical autumn maintenance, doing lots of grading, which I'm sure people have seen, blowing up leaves and culverts that keep getting filled up.
Yeah, he came yesterday on our road, and then he had to come back today because of the windstorm.
Yeah, the wind and rain, Dan said, has been really putting a damper on blowing up culverts, because he said they keep having to go back to the same culverts multiple times a week.
Yeah.
He also said he prefers snow to rain.
He's not alone.
They're getting tired of this rain because it's ruining all the grading. that
Them
they
and me
keep
too,
doing.
but I'd even be more tired of snow.
Well, you're not going to suffer too much.
But they've also been installing new culverts in quite a few places in town.
Larger
And the road crew is going to be slightly smaller for the next week or so, because 3 of them are off hunting.
Oh, of course.
But they do have backups in
And they're
place.
local. Except for Dan, they're all locals.
Yep, except for Dan, they're all locals, so they do have someone extra to call in case it's needed for a snowstorm. But
Great.
everything's good.
I would like to ask if you and Dan have worked on the revision of the timesheets yet.
We have not, because he's been taking care of a number of grading and other issues, and so he has not had time to come in and meet with me.
But I'm pretty sure that most of it is going to be you're changing stuff, and then he's going to say yes or no.
That is probably true.
So that might be a good thing to get on your...
Yeah, we already talked about it before he left, and we're going to deal with it when he comes back.
Okay, thanks. So we received the draft of the audited financial statements, and I am reading through it because I've seen a couple
For
of
the
mistakes.
FY18 audit.
For the FY18 audit, right. So we, I don't know, do you think, would people rather see copies of it in hard copy? Because it's
Actually,
hard
I
to
would,
read it
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
PDF and online. Okay, so Peter, maybe you can put copies in people's mailboxes
Sure,
tomorrow.
no problem.
I've seen a couple things that I want to question, but I need to go through it now with this copy. But Peter, you have a couple of preliminary conclusions to draw from this that you might be able to share with us?
Overall, it's very positive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why Google Docs was made it a little bit funny. There are no major findings. There are no minor findings. Most of what's in here, besides a few typographical errors, are just similar things that we have every year, just updates to our capital assets list, which we worked on. So there's obviously all the work that was done in this building was added in there, as well as the new equipment that has been purchased for the road crew over the past year. And then thankfully there were only a few minor journal entries that needed to be made, most of which already have been done, one of which I need to request your approval tonight, actually during this time. But overall, she was very impressed. There was nothing serious in there, and one of the positive things, which is what the journal entry I need to request from you, is that we have a surplus for both the general fund and the highway fund.
Can I ask the one minor, I thought there was one minor thing.
Yep.
$7,000 or something, it had
Oh,
to do
right,
with the
the
payroll.
uncorrected misstatement.
Or whatever, yeah. That
Past
could be-
adjustment was to report, is that it?
Oh, yes.
And I just
what page
wondered
is that?
what
I forget what, yes, I
Your
recall that one.
perception of that was.
I talked about it with Bonnie. Can I see?
It's page 2, I believe.
Yeah, it was up front.
Just a second.
I mean, it's very
I just-
minor.
So
It's in-
it's been a couple weeks since I looked at this, so
Yep.
just here.
Right after audit adjustments, it's,
Uncorrected misstatements. During the course of our audit, we accumulated one uncorrected misstatement that was determined by management to be immaterial to the financial statements and to the related disclosures. The past adjustment was recorded accrued payroll in the amount of $7,118 in the general fund and government activities.
I'm trying to remember what that, I know part of that amount was for some, relating to the RERP grant. Part of the payroll accounting for that was not run through payroll. There's an
Okay.
amount for Sheila, for the work that she did on that was just cut as a check, and it should have gone
Okay.
through payroll for her. So that was part of that, and I don't remember what the remaining balance was. So I will look into that and
Okay.
get back to you.
What was the name of the grant?
The RERP.
The emergency.
Oh, that's the emergency management.
That was the emergency
Thank you.
management grant.
Thank you. Just to understand it more.
Yep.
It's not a big deal. in the
No,
scheme
it's
of-
immaterial.
Yeah.
But I was just curious.
well, it was right up
Through it.
front too, so.
Yes. If you want, I'll contact you so we can just have a refresher on that. If you don't feel it's necessary, it's fine.
I think we might next week come back, or in 2 weeks, come back with more questions, because we're all gonna be able to look at this
Okay.
copy.
Yep.
And we have to
So-
approve, do we have to approve it?
We don't have to
as
approve
a-
it tonight.
There's-
No, but we have to approve it,
Yes.
yeah.
You do need to approve it before it's finalized.
But your accounting needs to be approved. You said something about.
That's
Well,
not dependent on
That,
the.
Oh, it
that is
isn't?
not,
Okay.
so
Good.
these are they're
Separate.
related,
Two
but they're two
separate
separate
issues.
items. They'll be covered right now.
Good.
Okay, any more, so I have a question or a comment. So once this is completely cleared up, and I think it's cleared up enough so that you can now update the source and use of funds?
Correct.
And the capital assets spreadsheet so that we are at year 1 plus 10. One gone, new
Correct.
one added.
Correct.
And when can we expect that?
When would you like? You want it? I mean, we could have it for the next meeting.
Okay, I think we've been talking about it, having it updated for some time, so.
Yep, sure.
As long as, so for 11/26. So that's that beautiful work of art that you and Gabby did. So we've got we're through our first year.
Yeah, and we have to
So now we
update
have
it.
to keep going, we
To
have
the
to roll it
second
into
year.
we have to pay attention to the second year, look at what we didn't do the year 1, and also add a year on and get rid of
Yep.
the first year.
Right.
Because this is a rolling 10-year
All right,
statement.
that is an action step for the next one.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
And we should make sure that Gabby knows to look through this before the next meeting.
So you'll put a copy in each select board
All of you
members?
actually have, I mean, I can put the hard copy in your mailbox if you wish, but you all have access to that document through
Yeah,
I know, I thought we
But
were
I
talking.
can't print it.
the source and use.
Oh,
No,
Are you talking about
source and
this,
use.
are you talking about this, Miranda? The
Yeah.
audit
Are we
report?
talking about two different things here?
I think I was just talking about the audit.
Yeah, Gabby needs a copy of that as well.
Yes, I'll put hard copies in everyone's mailbox
And
of the audit.
And what Fran is saying is maybe just give Gabby a heads up
Yep.
that a hard copy is waiting for her.
I will send her an email.
Thank you. Any other comments on the audit?
Related to the audit is also the budget surplus transfer, and I've got copies of for everyone.
Thank you.
So you can see for the general fund, which is the first journal entry. So in addition to this, the reason these are items 12 and 13 is because there were 11 prior journal entries that were done that Ellie and I did when Bonnie was here. Item number 12 is the general fund. So there is a surplus of $113,708.89. So the request would be to transfer that to the reserve fund, which I think that you guys should be happy about considering the money that was just spent out of there.
Yes.
And so with the money that was just spent for the renovations and then this amount being added in, we are now just under the maximum threshold for
That's
that.
what I was gonna ask, okay.
Yep.
And I think it's important that people in the town know that. You know, somebody came up to me at the polls and was talking about how much we spent on the renovations of the office building. And I think it's important that we reassure people that we came in under budget and that we have money to put back in our reserve funds.
Yep. So from Bonnie's calculation, that if you guys decide to transfer this back into the reserve fund, that will bring us up to just about 17%.
And close to the upper limit. that
That's
we're
correct.
allowed to have.
In the maximum amount we're allowed to have is 20%.
Yeah.
So that's very positive. Then you'll see for journal entry 13 is that we have $280,355.85 to transfer out of the highway fund into the highway reserve fund. And this amount is slightly deceptive in the sense that part of this was highway retreatment funds that were rolled over from last year that still did not get used. So part of this is, yes, a budget surplus, but part of it is left over from last year that was unused.
So basically what this says is that in the summer of the fiscal year 2008, 18, 19, or 2019, 20, whatever, next summer, we're going to have to do 3 years worth of paving, or we might be doing 3 years worth of paving.
Theoretically, yes, that could happen. Based on conversations with Dan, I think that what he's planning right now is it'll be 2 years worth of paving. 1 year is the grant that we just received, and then 1 year will be to cover the current fiscal year that we're in.
But Sheila's point is that some of this
It's gonna be spent on
utilized.
that.
It's already really been called for, but he's
Yeah.
held off.
It's
on
earmarked,
utilizing it.
basically.
Well, no, it's not actually, because we currently, for the current fiscal year that we have in there, we already have last year's money rolled in, plus this year. So we currently have 2 years sitting in there. This was from the year before.
Oh,
So this
But
is
Dan had planned some paving to occur.
He had, but it
this
hasn't
year.
happened.
That hasn't happened, and that's what.
And then the paving grant that we got from the state further compounds that.
Exactly.
So,
And is that time sensitive in terms of when the paving needs to happen?
yes, we have 2 years to
Oh, the
use-
grant,
to
for the
use the
grant.
grant.
For the grant.
That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's correct. We have 2 years to use the grant, and so it was just awarded in July, so we're at the very beginning stages. Dan and I just talked about it actually before he left, and we're going to work on an RFP probably in March, so we can have somebody hopefully paving by May or June, is what he would like to see.
Could you send something out that just breaks down the 280 as to what was added from this past year
Sure.
to what was moved forward in prior years?
Sure.
Just to understand the percentage.
And I'm looking in the audit report to see what we transferred last year as opposed to what we transferred this year. And
Last year in the highway department, we had actually a deficit.
That's what I was,
okay.
No, we had a deficit in the highway department and we had a surplus. Once the highway deficit was taken care of, we had a surplus, because I was looking at it this afternoon,
Yeah.
of 42,100 and something in the general fund.
yeah, it wasn't.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve the journal entries, the adjusting journal entries to transfer budget surpluses and according to this memo.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Wyndham Solid Waste Management District Representative. Cheryl Franklin has been doing this for years, and she's been doing a fabulous job for us. And she's always been available to answer questions and guide me or Troy, you know, the alternates before. She resigned last week, effective the day of resignation. And she did not go, she resigned right before the Wyndham Solid Waste Management meeting on November 8th, last Thursday. So we were not represented there. And Peter talked to her, I've talked to her, and Gordon has talked to her. And we are waiting for Cheryl to summarize, to give us some bullet points on the reasons for the resignation and what she would recommend going forward. So I'm going to recommend that we take no action, in other words, to appoint another representative,
Right.
Until we have some more in-depth information from Cheryl, and have a chance to discuss it as a board, perhaps in executive session, so we can figure out how we want to proceed with that. So that's
I'm sorry to interrupt, what kind of commitment is the representative to the solid waste district? Is
I think
it like
from-
a monthly meeting?
It's at least a monthly
It's-
meeting, and Cheryl was on the finance committee as well, so she was really very immersed in the finances and the budgets,
And that's what she pretty much said to me, is that it's only up to once a month, but if you're on committees where a lot of the issues get resolved and take place,
Yeah.
it takes a lot more time.
so I also appreciate her talking to all three of us at
Yes,
some
and
length.
which I had said to her, I'm sure you've talked to others,
Yeah.
but I had a few things I wanted to ask you about. She was willing. Cheryl's done a great job for the
Yeah,
town of
and
Guilford.
including talking to us all.
Right,
Which
but
is
she really
So,
has
so we will
represented well.
we'll get some update, I'm hoping by the next meeting, but if not, early in December, and figure out how we want to proceed here. Okay, next item on the agenda is the flood and fluvial erosion hazard ordinance mailing materials. So the short story is, we, as a select board, will vote on the revised ordinance that some of us spent some time, it was last week, working on with Alyssa Savetto, and then, so everybody has had a copy of the revisions to the ordinance. And the purpose of the revisions meeting, which Veranda and I attended with Alyssa, Steve Lemke, and Linda Hecker. So Select Board, Floodplain, Conservation Commission, and then the emergency, the Wyndham Regional Commission expert, Alyssa Savetto, were there. And we were trying to take out as much of the language that could be considered hot points or triggers, and to clarify the issues so that there was no inflammatory language there and no hot points, and it's just as clear as we could be. And you have in your emails the edited, the last original version and the edits that were made in that copy, and then a PDF of the revised document. We will be voting on it as a select board on whether to adopt the ordinance next week, at the next
2
meeting.
weeks.
And then any number of things could happen. some residents could re-petition for the town to tell the select board to disapprove the ordinance. And they could re-petition within a certain period of time, so that the vote could, so they could possibly, if they chose to re-petition within a window, if they choose, so that the vote could be taken by Australian ballot at the town meeting. If they decide to re-petition and submit the petition before or after that window, the vote would have to be at a time other than at the town meeting, because there's a 60-day window to call a vote that is petition like that, that's in response to a citizen petition. So I'm hoping that we will have a sense of whether or not there's going to be a petition for the select board to disapprove the ordinance. And if we do, we have the Conservation Commission and the Planning Commission have prepared, along with Steve Lemke, floodplain administrator, a cover sheet, a cover letter, frequently asked questions, a summary of the thing that would go out to the town as an information mailing before we might hold a public information session. Actually, the Conservation Commission and the Planning Commission would hold a public information session on January 17th. So all of those things may or may not be triggered by by whatever the select board decides on November 26th. In the assumption that we will go ahead and do a mailing to the entire town, because we feel that this is a really important topic to be, open and communicative and transparent to the whole town, then we need to have a special budget to approve the mailing. Michelle Frizzy estimated how much a mailing to the whole town would cost, how much it would cost to put the materials together, get them printed, get them labeled, and get them posted. And so I think, and I had said the Planning Commission does not have sufficient funds to cover the cost of this mailing, nor does the Conservation Commission. So we felt that this was an important thing that the select board should participate in also. And so I asked Peter to create to examine where we might take some funds from, because we pretty much spent our posted budget already this year. Long-winded way of saying that Peter is going to present to us his recommendations for how we might cover the mailing if we need to do it.
Yep, so I just gave you a very brief memo just to kind of explain things to you, should this need to happen. And as Sheila explained, I mean, both the Planning and Conservation Commissions wouldn't have undertaken this work if the Select Board weren't reconsidering the potential readoption of this ordinance. And so because of that, I think that it's my personal opinion that this should then fall on the Select Board budget, not on their budgets. And so with that, I went through things, and I think due to the nature of what this is, as well as trying to reviewing the budget and the planned needs for the rest of this year, I think that the expenses for this I would recommend coming out of two different accounts. The first one is the advertising and subscriptions account. Historically, this has not been used a lot. As you can see, there's a budget for this year of $1,200. The year to date, we spent $107 of that, which is approximately 9% of that. And postage, as Sheila explained, we are already at 78% of the budget for postage. Part of the reason for that, though, is in anticipation of the dramatic postage increase coming January 1st, Penny and I were in discussion and decided to pre-purchase a whole bunch of stamps ahead of that.
Forevers.
That's correct, forever stamps. And so she spent about $1,500 on stamps, which we guess from our calculations should probably last us at least until March, which would then give us our final quarter of the year, which would basically match up with this. But should we, even if we do apply this mailing to it and put the postage on there, there's a few other areas we could move some funds to cover that overage.
town report mailing comes from another.
Yep, it has its own special
Good, okay.
account for mailing the town report.
So you're proposing pulling it out of these two line items?
I am, and
Cover it.
through the discussion that Sheila and I had with Michelle last week, she's estimating the maximum would be about $1,200 for printing and postage.
So that would cover it.
And so, since there's, roughly just over $1,000 in the advertising budget and another $400 in the postage, I think we should be fine.
So I don't think we need to,
I don't think there's any action
need
needed.
a motion,
No.
just to understand that
Yep.
the select board, the town will cover the cost of this mailing.
And-
In enormous appreciation of all the work that the Conservation Commission and the Planning Commission have done on this.
And the last thing is that if this is not acceptable, if you don't feel this is the best use of these funds, we could always take it out of the reserve fund as well, because that is for unexpected expenses, which this is.
But I think covering the recurring, I think it makes sense where you pulled it. That's a good job.
I had
Go ahead.
No.
I have a couple of questions. One, to the document and the timing, if the select board does reaffirm, and then there is a petition. I saw that the petition it can't be generated before, it can't be handed in before January 4th, I believe.
It
off the top
can
of
be.
my-
They can choose to hand it in.
Okay, let me clarify.
Yeah.
It can be submitted, but then there would be an added cost to the town.
Yeah, of
And it wouldn't be.
a separate vote. It would not be a
At
town.
town meeting. Is that gonna cause a problem with, an understanding in anyone else's mind? Not that we can control it, I don't know. I mean,
I don't think so, Gordon. I mean,
Okay.
we can recommend this window so that the vote could take place at the town meeting, or they can choose to do
Right.
what they want to, and then we'd
Right.
have to have another vote.
okay, but that will be communicated.
Yeah.
It has been the whole time, and that's
Yeah.
one of the big things that Sheila's been talking about throughout this whole process. And I think that many of the residents who are concerned about the adoption of the flood and fluvial erosion hazard ordinance are concerned about the economic impact. So
Right.
my presumption would be,
Right.
if they're going to submit that, they're not going to want the town to incur further economic impact
Correct.
by having to pay $5,000 or $6,000 for the town to have to organize a whole townwide vote.
Now, early on, when we started talking about this, I had the question I threw out there, why not just have a town vote on this? Why is it, instead of the select board? Is that still not, there's no option that we could actually do that
No.
and just put a warrant out that this will be,
No.
It's only
Okay.
select boards can.
Just
vote
wanted to
on
make sure.
ordinances.
Only the select board can adopt.
just wanted to be
ordinance.
clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's-
'cause someone
And the
had asked
select
me-
board has the authority to adopt it without
Yes, I
the
understand.
advice and consent of the town, and it's really the Guilford way
Correct.
that we want as much understanding and support and coming to an agreement about it. So my question is the new version that we all worked on, is that on the town website yet?
Peter put it up the next day.
That's awesome, Peter. Then we should really work to get people to take a look at it who had concerns. Especially with maybe on Front Porch Forum or somewhere that says, these are the changes that we made in response to the concerns of our residents. And what's left here are the parts of the ordinance that we're required to keep.
Excellent suggestion. I'll make a note and I'll do that when I send out the thing about the BCTV link to the meeting tonight.
That's right, so
Well said. Thank you.
we want people to know that.
Okay. Thank you, Miranda. Any other comments on that? So the next thing is the Green River Road repair project, conclusions and lessons. Yeah, I've got my copy. You guys have all seen this.
I just wanted people to
I
be-
know. I'm
No,
going
that's
to,
Appreciate that.
I'm gonna summarize it in very brief, and then you all can ask questions if you want. In very brief, we had this accident, the situation, the road fell apart, and we had to close the road, and then we had 2 bids out of we got a verbal approval from the state to repair the roads. We got 2 out of 3 bids, and then Danny got a little bit concerned that residents were inconvenienced and we weren't gonna get the repairs done in time for school to be open. And also, we only got 2 bids out of the requisite 3, and only one of those bidders could do the work within the window of the time frame that was gonna meet the requirements of residents and the school budget. And so we, the select board, accepted a proposal of $40-something thousand, it doesn't really matter what, and authorized Danny to go ahead independent of the grant. A couple weeks later, shortly after, and they started the work, they discovered that there was going to be a lot more work to be done, and so we approved additional $2,000 for X number of yards of material to do infill. And then a couple weeks towards the end of August, we sent a letter to V-Trans saying that we felt like we were in between a rock and a hard place, and we wanted to know how we could work better with them going forward, and we gave them some examples. On September 18th, I heard from V-Trans, and it was a difficult conversation because they were pretty upset about the fact that we weren't really happy with the way things happened, and they weren't really happy with the way things worked out. So Peter and I and Danny then spent a great deal of time trying to figure out how we could have done it better, what we did, why the invoice came in at $88,000 instead of $45,000, and trying to also satisfy V-Trans's concerns and requirements. Bottom line is, we have a few lessons learned, which I'll go over in a minute, but we did get the $45,000 something
It's $45,000 even.
from the state out of the $88,000 repairs that the town incurred. So we did not have to go into our reserve fund as much as we had anticipated. The lessons learned were...
And actually, it didn't come out of the reserve fund. Dan took it out of his retreatment fund since he knew that he's not going to be able to use 2 years' worth this year.
We didn't have to take it out of the retreatment fund because Dan knew that he wasn't going to be able to use it all this year in the next 2 years. So we have learned that multiple state agencies may need to be involved and must be notified. That costs to do this work, as people are on the ground and see things, may get a lot higher, and that we need to be, we may need to call special select board meetings to review the costs and to ensure that everybody's in agreement and that we're all on track, because I, for one, was taken aback by the $88,000 as opposed to $45,000. And so we need to understand where authority lies, and it lies with the select board, and we have to be responsible for that authorization.
So let me just ask though, I mean, are you saying that in a situation like this, where we've hired somebody to do what we thought was a piece of work, and they discover in doing so that the job is much greater than what everybody had estimated, then the select board needs to come together to approve the extra added funds by the special meeting?
Or we need to, and we need to involve the state authorities. Because if we had understood that the work was double what we thought it was going to be, then that needed to be approved by the state engineers, by V-Trans, by the river engineer from A&R. So, I mean,
that's an
a lot of
important
stuff went
lesson.
on that that was done to get the job done in the time constraints that we wanted to, as opposed to meeting state requirements and dealing with things on a slightly slower
But did we
basis.
know that it was going to be doubled? Well, I mean, when did we know it was going to be doubled? So how would we know when we should have, if we knew that we had to make people aware of this in the state government. When did we know that it was going to be double? Did that come as a bill, or
I
was
first
it?
heard of it as the bill. I
Yeah,
think we knew, I think,
So that
I
was
think
kind of late.
Danny probably knew and just said, go ahead, take care of things, because
Like-
your equipment is on the road. The guys have MT3 had a limited amount of time available to work on this. They knew what they were doing a good job. The town had said, we need to get this repaired for residents and the schools, so Danny probably was like, go,
I
and
mean,
So-
one of the key points with this that we learned from extended conversation with Mark and Megan, when they were very patient with us and trying to work through this with us.
Who are
Which we
Mark and
appreciate.
Megan?
V-Trans.
They, sorry,
Oh, V-Trans.
there are,
Okay,
there
got
are
it.
local V-Trans representatives.
Okay.
Is that if we would have had a pre-bid meeting, that we would have addressed this issue from the beginning, and so then all parties would have known from the beginning. And so, but it didn't happen. I mean, technically, it doesn't have to happen if we're not working with the state, but one of the lessons learned is that regardless of whether working with the state or not, it would be really good for us to do a pre-bid meeting regardless in the future for
Yeah, but a
events like
pre-bid
this.
meeting wouldn't have known that was the double what we thought the original
it was
was.
not the first one, but
Yeah.
if they'd started getting more stuff going on, then they would have had to do it.
And a
You're right.
follow-on question is, why, do we know why it doubled? I mean,
Yeah.
did we thoroughly investigate the doubling of the initial estimate?
I mean, because the initial estimate was based off of
The state's
assessment prior to the work beginning. Within the first several hours of work beginning, the contractor spoke with Danny and said, look, this is
a
going
lot
to be...
worse.
And because they were down in the
Farther,
river...
yeah, they were down, where Danny had been down, but the engineer hadn't been down.
No, Dan and the engineer did go down, but the V-Trans representatives did
Yeah.
not.
So-
Anyway, I mean, I think to your point, I remember Danny coming to us and saying that once they started, it was a lot worse. And
It was.
we didn't know
Right,
how
so
bad.
That means that we should have, that is the point where we should have got the
At a
state.
select board meeting.
Or, I mean, again, Danny's trying to do what he's always historically done for the town and get things done as quickly as possible without, opening up the road, allowing school to happen, all these things.
And knowing
And
that-
today, I don't think we can do that anymore as the way we used to.
Part of the thing is that
Efficiently as we used to.
MT3 was trying to respect what the state engineer had required for the rebuild of that road.
Gotcha.
And in order to meet their requirements, he had to do more work than they initially
Gotcha.
expected. And so it was the balancing of, okay, we need to do what the state engineer says so we can open the road,
Right,
but then it was an increased cost.
gotcha.
The other thing, can I said, make one other comment? The other thing is that, I'm gonna lose my train of thought. We had, of all the possible bidders, we only had one who could do the job
Right.
in the time frame that it
Right.
needed to be done. And that bidder was very busy themselves. So, I mean, it wasn't just somebody going, we gotta get the job done. It was, these are the
Stuff's
resources, we
there.
have to get
I
this
remember
job
this.
done.
And it was on the
Yeah.
road,
I'm
did we
sorry,
finish
Amanda,
it?
Oh, no, it's perfectly fine. I mean, I wonder if the state agencies do have the capacity to respond quickly. Like, do they have an emergency team? This must happen all the time now.
I
mean,
think so.
All over the state.
I think
Roads
we-
are washing out.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think the problem was that once we thought we were going on our own, we didn't, we stopped involving the state at
Right.
that point. and we
Aside from
should
the
have.
engineer.
Aside from the engineer, but we should have had more people involved all the way through the process.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we learned a lot.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to Peter and you for pulling this document together, Dan, I mean, that's a lot of rehashing, but I think going through the process and then rehashing it makes a lot of sense.
Where do we deposit this
This will be very
historical
helpful.
knowledge and this
So
lessons learned material so that it doesn't happen again?
So
I mean,
here's what I'm gonna ask Peter to do, which is to write a summary of the lessons learned for Danny
Mhm.
and put it in the contract book, or the
Oh, perfect, that's a good idea.
Mhm.
so that Danny has some notification. Because we had, and it's not just something was bad and didn't work right. There were lots of different pushes and pulls. And so, I want to be very respectful of everything that everybody did here.
Absolutely.
From V-Trans,
Dan.
State, Danny,
Town.
MT3. It was just great. I mean, we got it done, and we are lucky to get the $45,000 from the state.
Absolutely.
And this is
And we're
the
in good
new
standing
normal.
with the
We
with
are,
Vermont Trans.
yes.
We are, yes. Both, everywhere from Mark and Megan, all the way through, I happened to actually meet Mark's boss at the conference I went to, and things are great.
Good. Well done. That's good.
Better Connections grant update.
So, the November 1st, the Better Connections grant reopened again, and I have been kind of persistently asking questions since the beginning of September, just to make sure that we can submit the grant and not go through the events of last winter, and that both the Select Board and the Planning Commission have time to review this grant with ample time to ask questions and consider things. So in the moment, I am working with all the relevant parties to schedule a pre-application meeting, and so this is going to involve 2 individuals from the state, one from ACCD and one from VTrans,
What's ACCD?
the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Is that Katie's?
That's Katie's, yep.
Oh,
And then there's going to also be Sheila, as well as Michelle Frazee, as well as at least one person from Wyndham Regional Commission, Emily Davis, possibly one other, I'm not sure yet. Yeah, trying to put this meeting together. It's looking like it will most likely, and obviously myself, most likely happen next week. And so what the purpose of this meeting is to
Next week being November
Yes.
19th, week of the 19th,
Yes.
Thanksgiving week?
yes, it's looking like Tuesday the 20th is going to likely be the best date.
Can you refresh my mind about what the grant is for?
So this grant was the one that we were discussing last year about Algiers Village, particularly around the country store and the intersection of Guilford Center Road and Route 5, and the traffic issues there, as well as all the residences and the businesses that are on that intersection, and what to do with accessibility as well as future development.
So would it be a planning grant?
It is a planning grant, that is
And a
correct.
feasibility study.
And it's a feasibility study and planning grant, and the town would be responsible for 20% of that, should that.
We talked about this last year, didn't we?
That's correct.
Oh, yes,
we
end
did.
of January.
It is, yep, it's due.
And this is, the glossy was created for that. And the big
No.
glossy.
No,
No,
it's a
that
different.
was
That's
a
different. I'm
So
sorry.
the Living Communities Challenge Algiers Vision Plan was created by
I
4
got you.
nonprofits.
And I mean, also there's Gary Swindler from that is very
And me,
interested.
yeah.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
in multiple roles. So just finalizing that, so then won't really be more to tell you about until after that meeting.
And what's the granting agency?
It officially comes from ACCD, but it does, because a big portion of it relates to transportation. V-Trans is also involved.
so I have a question. I know that there was disagreement within the Planning Commission about going forward with that grant, and I wondered whether anything had changed since then, or is the purpose of this meeting to better explain and build consensus about that, so we don't get into the same situation?
So the disagreement was based on little advance notice of the grant. Basically,
Oh, really?
I had to say it's due tomorrow,
Oh,
you
okay.
know? And so nobody had a chance to study it or to
Okay.
think through the value of it. And in fact, the grant was pretty rushed. I had to do it,
Okay.
finish it in like a couple days. So I think it was just not
Okay.
getting the time to look at it and to consider.
This is last year's grant.
This was last
Last
year's
year,
grant.
yes.
So we did not submit it last year.
Well, it was submitted and then retracted.
Yeah, because of we needed the planning commission's approval as well. So-
But one thing I will add to this whole thing is that despite withdrawing the grant last year, both ACCD and VTrans graciously reviewed our grant and have some really excellent feedback
Yes.
for us for this year, which is going to be incorporated into this meeting. So with that, they're going to help us make our application more competitive.
Great.
Because in short, the feedback that they did provide us was my personal interpretation that I don't think that our application was competitive. But that's my
I
personal
agree. I
interpretation.
think you're right. Okay,
Terrific.
proposed Broadbrook Community Center agreement questions. Gordon had a number of questions that he raised about the Broadbrook Community Center Town of Guilford arrangement that was proposed that we have not taken a vote on yet. Actually, we need to probably consider within the context of the budget, but, so,
Yeah, I thought we were
Would you
going to
like
talk
to-
about it in the budget meeting.
yeah, do you want to talk about your questions, Gordon?
You know, and just a couple things, in thinking about it, it kind of surprised me having that conversation that night. Not unexpected once I heard everything, but as a a member of the town of Guilford, when this was brought before at the meeting, last town meeting, part of this to me was the relief of the tax piece, which we'd always previously done with the Grange. So I felt, well, as a citizen of the town of Guilford, this all makes a lot of sense. So that relationship would continue moving forward. And I understand that BBCC has to survive moving forward, but I think in raising the question of a partnership with the town, it raises the question of spending a big chunk of money on an annual basis for this relationship. So my questions were simply generated on trying to gain an understanding of how the town would utilize the space moving forward, and if we would have enough meetings or events that it would pay for the relationship they are asking us to have. So, I can run through these questions if you would like.
I read them.
And if I could add to
Yep.
what Gordon just said, is I think one thing, at least from my perspective and my everyday job, I would ask you guys to consider is, yes, I think it's great that they're presenting it as a relationship, but this really is a contract that they're asking the town to engage in. And so to view it in that way, I think is how I interpreted a lot of Gordon's questions. He didn't present it as a contract to me and Sheila when he asked the questions, but that's how I personally interpreted it, and I think that's how it should be viewed. Because it's a substantial amount of money.
What you're saying is, if I understand you, that we have to understand the context, is that his concern is coming from the fact that we would be entering into a contract.
Yes.
Well, it's part of it, and it's the expense of the contract,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And I just think that, and, I appreciate where Sarah and Don were coming from that night, but it was kind of just, it seemed like the number had just kind of been generated as a starting point to have a conversation. So before I, as a select board member, was comfortable saying this is a great idea for the town moving forward, I just had other questions.
So I was able to answer some of Gordon's questions here, which is why you guys didn't get this over the weekend to review, as I was trying to get as many answers as I could.
Great.
So his first question is, how has the town used the space in the past? So in talking to a number of people, the main things that it has been used for is obviously voting. The library uses it for summer camp every year for about 2 weeks, as well as other on and off events. The longer that the Recreation Commission has been around, the more that they use that space for their events as well, because it's a convenient location. And then both the Planning and Conservation Commissions also use that building regularly throughout the year. And then obviously the Select Board has used it in the past for informational meetings for a variety of purposes. Other events that relate to the town occur there, but they're not sponsored by the town, so that's why they're not included in this list. One prime example is pre-town meeting. That's a Grange-sponsored event, and it will continue to be a Grange-sponsored event, so it's not there under the auspices of the Select Board. if that makes sense. So that would be under the Grange's agreement.
Excuse me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So based on that list of events, so Gordon's second question is how many times a year do we use it? So based on those, the past 3-ish years, we've been averaging between 30 and 35 days a year, how many times we use it. They were presenting it at 40 times a year, which, as Dawn noted, is that's more than they expected that we were using, but they wanted to give us a buffer for unforeseen things. One question that was kind of hard to answer that Gordon asked is, what might we use this space for in the future that we don't currently? And I think if you guys decided to sign the contract with them, I think it would be up to your imagination what we can use it for. I think they would obviously be flexible with you on what that can be done. His next question is, what other options do we have and at what cost to the community? For example, the school or other options. So the two primary ones that the town has used in the past is Guilford Central School and the Guilford Community Church. For public events, particularly information events and voting, when it happens at the school, because that's information for the public, the school does not charge us for those events because they want to make it accessible to as many people as possible. We have used the church for a few events, and they do request a donation. It's kind of on a sliding scale depending on who's requesting the use of the space and how many people are going to be there. Obviously, the more people that are there, the more that they ask, because there's potentially more cleanup or other items for them to do after we're done.
And there's no Wi-Fi or cell service there.
And that's one point of note, is there's no Wi-Fi.
And also, it's not necessarily appropriate to have public events in the church, even though the church is a great citizen. It's still
Still a church.
A church.
So, Gordon's next question is there a size limit with the space at BBC or other locations? So this is one of the big questions I'm asking about. And regarding BBCC, the answer is yes, but what it is at the moment is unknown. For plays and other events that happen upstairs, they have had as many as 140 people up there, but with their recent inspection from the state fire marshal, they are expecting that there will, because it is a public events space, that there will be an occupancy limit on it, but they do not, I'm waiting on a response what it is. Regarding the school, obviously, yes, there are occupancy limits, but those are based off of what space that select board requested to use. So if we use the cafeteria versus using the gymnasium, there's obviously a big difference between the 100+ people that can go in the cafeteria versus several hundred that can fit into the gym.
Do we pay the custodial fees for overtime and
We don't.
setting up and things like that?
Nope.
Wow, okay.
John does not require us to do so.
We really should.
And the church also has a limit, and I don't know what it is, but it's the smallest of all 3 locations. Last but not least, Gordon's final question is, what is the dollar value of the tax exemption of property taxes voted on at last year's town meeting? And now that the select board has given the Anthony lot to the Grange, it's now considered as one property. So that total, I asked Lisa about this, and the total taxes for that property is $5,380, not taxes, this is how much taxes they would pay if they were not voted out. It's $5,388.55.
25.
Sorry, thank you, 25 cents.
Let me add some context, and I'm not suggesting that, I'm not trying to sway the board in any direction, but I think that part of our thinking about this should be the context of what that center is trying to do, is to become a community center. And they want, and the town's occupancy of it, participation in it, I think is an imprimatur to make it more of a community center than it is. And I think that we should think of that in that context. Guilford doesn't have a community center really, and what that organization, that 501c3 nonprofit, is wanting to do as part of its mission is to have a center for the community to gather in Guilford. So I think that the board has to take that context into consideration.
Thanks. Can we turn up the heat a little?
It's over.
It's actually automatically set in. It's a
There's
little
the-
it's complex to do. It can
Okay.
be done, but
Throw
it's
your coat
complex. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I will.
Did you have any comments you wanted to make that would heat you up?
It's a moment of levity. My impression is that the BBCC is working through their figures as well as other aspects of the change. At the apple pie social, Sarah threw out that they were not going to raise the fees right away. They were not going to raise the fees from the Grange fees for rentals, and she was encouraging people to step up and use it, have fun there and do stuff. And so that seemed like a change from the figures, the draft figures that they were throwing out to us as part of, the conversation about the money. And so
I don't know whether that would change the $10,000 though.
So
I don't know
I
that
think
it
it's-
would change it, but I do think that it was a request and not a firm figure.
200. I think were they charging us $250 an event?
It was $250 or $225.
And is that if you divide it, is that what the 10,000
It's
comes out?
$250. It's $250 an event. So I have like 3 observations, comments to make. One is one of the things that we are hearing as a select board and as a town is that communication and outreach is ever more important to everybody. And I see this being an added factor in our budgeting, that we can't have more events, we can't do more mailings, we can't do more, create a better presence on the web without deciding that we need to spend money on this. In fact, I asked Sarah yesterday at this event, I'm like, how can you guys afford a mailing to the whole town? Like more than one. And she said, we budget for it in their budget, And like, we have not budgeted townwide mailings or much in the way of internet presence and stuff like that.
Well,
So-
that's a suggestion then, that we ought to increase the communications budget.
So I know, which we are going to think about, but we also may want to take this into consideration in terms of, being able to do more community outreach as a select board. And maybe we could just say, we could make a deal with them that we would do it at the going rate not to exceed $10,000 a year or something like that. But I also want to remind us that this is not, in the end, our decision. If we're going to put something in the budget like this, it will be a town decision to, the select board does not decide to enter into this contract. We present the budget to the town decides whether this is one of the line items that they want to support, and we will either defend it or not at pre-town meeting and during town meeting. But we are not making a decision now on independent of the town, because it is a pretty big, significant budget thing. I mean, we have long conversations about $300 at town meeting.
Yeah.
So this is gonna be perhaps a big conversation,
Might I recommend, should the select board be interested, you could actually make this a
Separate
separate article.
Well, that's what I was,
warrant.
Yeah.
and give the town the option
I think that's
to
a good
adopt
idea.
this.
Well, might not treat it as any of
Because
the
then we would
other.
really get, if the town wants this resource and wants the
Exactly.
town to use this resource,
Exactly.
we'd get
Right.
the town's opinion about it.
Right,
And that way,
and
I
I
mean-
think it's cleaner, I really do, and it's for the benefit of the town.
And that way, then, if the town says yes, then it's your responsibility how to best manage those funds that have been granted you. And if the town feels it's not of utmost importance, well then, that's their decision. That doesn't fall on you.
It's
And
kind
someone,
of
and
a-
someone from the BBCC would have to speak to the article.
Oh, absolutely.
So that would
Absolutely.
further explicate what's.
Exactly.
But
What
I'm
it's
just
all
saying,
about.
this would be a select board article, not a BBCC
Right,
article.
that's right, at the town meeting, yeah.
And it would,
You mean,
It would
wait
be
a
warned.
second,
Yep.
it would be warned by the select board, not by BBCC?
Yeah.
That's correct.
so
I
Miranda, it'd
see.
be kind of like a social agency's appropriation
Yeah.
or something. It's one of those things that's a special,
Right.
like highway, whatever.
No, no,
Fire
I
department, whatever,
understand.
But,
But the library used to have to do,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yep.
No, I mean, I want to honor the amount of passion and hard work that everybody has already done and will continue to do to make it so. And I don't want it to be cursory or ornery,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
and that is not my intent by raising these questions, I too, I support all the effort that has gone into doing what they've done for
And
this.
what they still need to do.
And what they still need to do, and what it represents for the town. But I just
No, I
No,
mean,
that's
we-
I've had a lot of, the more I talk about some of these things with other people, they raise some very good questions.
Thank
so
you.
it's-
but so I think
It's
we've
not
come
meant to
with
be
the
cursory.
the right method, the method
Yes,
that is
I
really
think
called
so.
for to handle an
Yeah.
issue like this.
I think that's
Which is,
good.
it should be the town's decision of whether they want it to be
Yeah.
part of the town's budget.
And thank you for asking these questions, because I think it helps us focus a little more clearly on these
And
things.
so if the town doesn't want to be part of the town's budget, then,
Then the budget has to be reduced and we have to vote on the reduction.
No, if it's a separate article, then that's a separate
Oh.
amount.
Right?
That's separate
Right.
from.
So it would be added to if
It
it
would
was
be
approved.
added to if it was approved.
And it might be that this coming year, we can find a way to offset that expense, because I think we have some things that are going, maybe will be reduced, so
So it will wash out.
one hopes.
so are we voting on that,
No,
or is
we're
that
not.
a
This
recommendation?
is just a further clarification of that discussion that we had.
But so we haven't decided, how do we decide whether it should be an article?
So the process, Richard, is we look at this in the budget,
Budgeting
in the budget
meetings
workshops.
upcoming.
And if we want to, if we can find a way to get $12,000, $10,000
10,000.
in there, then we will decide we're gonna do a special warrant. So that will be that will be in connection with the budget workshops.
That's what the number was initially?
It's
was
10,000
10,000.
plus the 2,500 estimated value of the snow plowing and stuff like that, so. Are we ready to move on?
Yes, thank you.
Town
Peter.
Office Assessment Bureau, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, and I will use less than that. So,
Thank you.
obviously, as everyone knows, all this wonderful work has been done on this building. And with the townwide appraisal last year, we knew that this work was going to be done. And so I had spoken with Lisa about it, and she asked the company that was doing that work to hold off on doing the assessment of the town office until the work was completed. And since they are also one of the companies that provided Lisa with her primary software, she's in communication with them regularly. And Russ was coming down to do quite a bit of work for Lisa one day last week, and so I asked her to add this to his agenda while he was here, and so he did his assessment of this, and so Lisa changed the valuation of the town office, and just want to update you guys. So it had previously been assessed at $206,570, and his new assessment is, and this includes the land, is $439,900.
Doubled it.
That's correct.
Well, we didn't spend it.
And you've adjusted the insurance
Yep,
accordingly.
yep, and an excellent question that he had when he was here that none of us had thought about is, what about our insurance? So I contacted Passive, and thankfully, we have a full replacement policy, so they said regardless of having done the work or not, even if we hadn't notified them, we would have had full replacement should there be a devastating event. That being said, they did appreciate the update, and they will be sending their own assessor to come down and review the work that was done. And as we learned, they do an assessment of all of the town-owned properties every 5 years, and it's been almost 7 years since they have been here, so they're going to be sending someone down within the next 3 or 4 months. They're a little behind on their work, obviously.
Great, thank you.
So, that's it.
Social service agency, social service
Yep,
appropriations.
so there was actually a sub-warrant in here. It was a warrant only because of the fact that in order to print the checks, we have to do a warrant. That being said, it doesn't need to be signed by the select board because all of these appropriations were approved by
Right.
Guilford residents at
Right
town
here.
meeting day.
Right.
And then at 2 meetings ago, the select board approved the transfer of tax funds into the appropriate account numbers. And so I just want to let everyone know that we have cut checks to everyone, all of our social services agencies, as well as Rescue Inc., as well as the fire department, and Wyndham Regional Commission.
Great, good work.
Well done.
All those checks are going out so we can support the good work that they do.
Gordon, would you like to do warrants?
Okay, I make a motion to pay the following warrants. Payroll week ending October 28th, 2018 for $7,820.12. Payroll week ending 11/4/18 for $7,225.71. Payroll week ending 11/11/18 for $11,614.81. Expense warrant number 1909 for $41,503.32. Expense warrant number FW09 for $46. Expense warrant number 10CC for $1,822.50. And expense warrant number BM08 for $114.60 for a grand total of $70,147.06. And with our largest expense warrant of 1909, the 41,000, that was primarily attributed to our highway department for work that has been done by contractors, as well as some expense work on our fleet and equipment.
Second.
A couple of notes before we take a vote. On that expense warrant for $41,000, I think there's a invoice of $5,400 for a new leaf blower that's under repairs.
Yeah, you're right.
And that is a new piece of equipment. It's not a major piece of equipment.
I saw
It was
that
by
at
my
work
house.
today.
And the old one wasn't working very well.
Got a lot of leaves onto my yard.
It died.
It died. So it's
It's a much more effective leaf blower
Yeah,
than we had before.
it
And it's
it
quieter.
falls under the radar of necessary select board approval, but it is kind of a significant highway.
I have a question about
Thank
the
you
leaf
for
blower. What happens to all the people who pay money and work very hard to get the leaves out of the yard?
And
then
into the dishes?
This machine comes and blows it
I
back
don't
into
know,
the
talk
yard.
to Danny about that.
I think it would be
I was
great
thinking
They
in
try to do their
the
best to
future
prevent that
have
from occurring. but-
a leaf mulch project, just to be able to mulch those leaves and have people use them for their gardens. I
You
mean,
and Danny can talk about that.
yeah.
And the other note that I'd like to make, I think, is that for payroll week ending November 11th, the reason that it is $4,000 higher is because of select board stipends.
Oh.
So,
Oh, correct.
yeah.
Which
So
account
just,
is
We
that in?
get
It's in your box.
You,
too.
they have notices, notes, not envelopes, just so you know that.
Oh, they,
I don't know what the notes say, but you,
The notes say that there's a payment,
okay.
but there's no
So-
check.
About
I
that.
didn't know there was no check in there.
Thank you, Sheila, for that
So,
clarification. I did not pick up.
so
on
all
that.
in favor,
Two
oh,
checks and
all in
no sale.
favor? You're
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is that everybody? Yes.
It was everyone.
Thank you. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Peter, on finances before we move on to church communications is
Yes.
we are short a couple $100,000 or
Yep, I sent you
in
an email
taxes.
about that last week.
You said you were going to figure it out, but I didn't know if you had a chance to figure it out.
No, I had too
You
many
had
other
this
things to
week.
say.
Yes?
So it's similar to last year in that, for one thing, too much money was transferred into the highway department funds, which is the same thing that we discovered last year with Cynthia. And so we need to do a journal entry to transfer those funds back in there. So then that will bring it up to our usual in the high 80s to low 90s percentage-wise for that. And then obviously, once again in the spring, once the state does the adjustment, the education
There's two in
adjustment,
there.
then we'll find out if we overpay the schools, which
Okay.
we generally happens every year.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we can expect that
It will,
clarity
yes, it will
next
change.
week.
By the next select board meeting, that will have it changed.
Okay, the other, okay, so the next thing is communications, and we had in our folder a letter from Nancy Leach at the Guilford Community Church. A very nice letter about the sort of the confluence of Ruckup and the church together. And their suggestion was that out of respect for the decades of the Guilford Community Church's pie sale, that Ruckup be permitted to hold their donation drive beginning at 12:30 or on any day of that weekend other than the Saturday where everybody's hopefully buying pies. And I think that's a very
I agree
respectful
with
and
you.
sensible decision.
I do too.
And I thought,
And so what is the select board's role in that?
we give Ruckup permission to,
Oh.
on an annual basis.
Remember, they come here and they
Oh,
make a
yes, for sure.
presentation? Yeah.
That's a
Yeah,
great-
To,
and so it would be great if they had their own day rather than.
No, they want to do it on that day,
They
which is
wanna
just a
do
different
it.
hour.
So
They're
it's
suggesting
Columbus
doing
Day
it-
weekend, and everybody comes, and, you know, everybody's driving, and there's two there.
There's
I'm
nothing.
giving you
But
this
isn't
one.
Columbus Day weekend like 3 days? I mean,
Yeah.
It generally is,
indigenous
yes.
peoples.
Well, they can just do it at a different hour. That's what the suggestion
Yeah, I
is.
mean, the church, as she notes.
They do it early in the
I
morning.
think she noted in here, they're done by noon.
Oh, they are done by noon.
So-
Oh, great. No
So we don't have to act on this, all we need to do is remember when they come
Yep.
that we agree with
Is
the
there-
church.
Yes, you have three.
And would you please let Nancy know that we
Thrilled.
appreciate her letter, and we agree with her proposal.
And I have a note written to myself that presumably Ruckup will request an audience with the select board this winter, like they always have been for the past
They
8
always
years.
do. Yep.
And so I have a note just to say, yes, we would like you to be here and support your work, but just do it in the afternoon.
Do it,
Or
after the pie sale.
or on a different day if they
Or on a
want.
Or
different
on a
day.
different day that
I mean,
weekend.
they could do it on Sunday or
Right.
Monday
Yeah. Right.
of that weekend.
There's still lots of traffic on the roads. And are there other communications, Peter?
The only thing is, I would like to remind people, the studio audience, that tomorrow is the select board's first budget planning meeting. Also, hint, reminder to the select board.
1:30.
Thank you, Gordon.
It's Wednesday, right?
Tomorrow.
No, tomorrow.
Yes, and I.
Oh,
I
actually,
won't
that's
be
right.
here.
You will not be here, but you would
Yeah.
let us know that
I
you
will
would
be
not.
here.
Yes.
I just remembered, I was thinking about it today for my schedule.
So yeah, and that is a publicly
Tuesday.
warned meeting. No decisions will be made, but it is to begin the process of discussing our budget.
And Richard, you can just update.
I shall.
Well, the budget
Lucky to
worksheet
be
will be in a
neighbors.
new folder.
There's
So
a big
it'll
gap.
be, you'll be seeing it.
Okay.
You'll
How
be
long do you
getting
think the meeting will last? Oh, it's an
12
hour.
Is it?
hours.
No.
special for you.
All of them together.
Miranda, you
It
didn't
won't be
say
more than
this.
an hour.
I have it scheduled as an hour. I remember last year's
I know.
first meeting was about an hour and a half.
Yeah, it took a little.
But we try and keep them all at 1 hour.
Yes.
Particularly the ones in the middle of the day, out of respect for your busy schedules.
Indeed. I move that we adjourn, Madam
I
Chair.
would second that motion.
Would you? Thank you.
You're welcome.
And
the
Peter,
time,
thank you
all
for
in favor,
all of your hard work.
7:47.
Aye.
I've tried. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.